Up next, it's time to declare war on Flash. Hey everybody, it's Kenny Conklin from HobbyLinkInternational.com and welcome back. It's been a while since I've done a regular video, and as most of you know, I moved over a year ago and we are still not done with the house. So I apologize if there's some bad audio and for the clutter in the background, but hopefully by the end of the year, the studio will be done and we'll be making regular videos again. So today we're going to talk about a new product from Flashmaster Hobby. They're not X-Acto blades, but they are blades to help you remove flash from your kits. We're going to try it on some styrene products and we're going to try it on a resin product and see how well they do. And then we'll do some torture tests on it. And when I mean torture tests, we're probably going to do some things that normally wouldn't happen, but we're going to see how they hold up. So let's get over to the bench and show you these little guys. The Flashmaster blades come in a little plastic container and they come 10 in the set. These retail for $9.90 US, and they can be found on the Flashmaster site or on Amazon. You'll be able to find the links in the description below just in case you want to order these. So here we have a number 11 X-Acto knife and the Flashmaster flexible knife right next to each other for a size comparison. You can see the number 11 blade is a lot bigger than the smaller flexible blade, and the other major difference is the number 11 blade has a longer shank on it to hold the blade inside the working handle. The Flashmaster is supposed to fit into any working handle as long as the top can fully close. And what I'm talking about fully closed is, I don't know if you can see it in here, if this will focus, but there's no gap in here. We're going to be shoving one of the blades into here and we'll show you the difference between the two. So we have two blade holders here. This one is from Excel and this is an X-Acto. We're going to put both blades in and see how they work out. So what we'll do is we'll take the X-Acto blade as that one rolls off to the side. I got me a nice new sharp one, and we'll just jam this sucker in there. And then I could put that down. I know I'm twisting on the blade, but put that sucker all the way down there and nice and tight. So let's try the same thing with the Flashmaster. Now the Flashmaster, there's my little gap. Alright, that's already posing me a problem. And you can see what the problem is, and that is it doesn't sink all the way in and stay steady for you, so you can just close it up. That is just a little bit of a pain in the neck. Mine does close all the way. Now it's just getting this guy in there and to stay at a length I want it. So it's definitely not the easiest thing to do off the bat, getting it into your blade holder. It's in there, it's tight, it's a little crooked, so I got to open it up and adjust it. So one suggestion I would already make on these blades is make the shank longer. This way it sits in there a lot easier, and we don't have to play games with it trying to get it into position. So that's definitely a con of the blade already. So I'm going to get this in position off camera. I will get it in there straight and I'll show it to you when I'm done. I have the blade in there nice and straight without with little problem, because like I said, if the shank was longer on here and it could just sit in, you can pop it in like a number 11 blade and just twist away and you have no problem. But other than that, so far so good. Now the difference between this guy, the X-Acto, and the Flexmaster is the I guess rigidity of the blade. you're not going to be able to bend this guy. If I try to press down really hard, I'm going to snap the tip off of this. Now if I take this guy, here's the Flex Master, I can bend all the way up like this and it's flat. If you can see, I'll try to hold it this way because my camera's from the above view, but you can see the bend in it, and it is just bending and not breaking. So right there, that's a pro to get into corners and stuff like that. Wiggle it around, no problem. So the next test for this guy is to get it onto some resin and styrene and see how it cuts. So this is a resin skeleton warrior. If you watched the live stream the other night, this is my Halloween build, and in between the cloth there's resin flash, which I'm going to try to get off. It's kind of hard to see on camera here, but we're going to work on it. And this is the new blade from Flashmaster. This is the bendy blade. That was one other difference that I wanted to point out, that the sharp edge of the X-Acto is on the angled portion. The sharp edge of the Flexmaster is on the flat edge, but you still have the flat edge like we use on the X-Acto knives for scraping. You can do the same exact thing on there. It's not super sharp, but there is sharpness to it. The only thing I'm worried about, I know it's not going to snap because of how bendy it is. The only thing I'm worried about is cracking this resin because it's so old. Okay, that is a pretty big piece of flash, and use the other side. I'm actually having trouble cutting through the resin with this. It's not scraping it. It's not scraping the resin off that easy. Oop. That side, I was using the wrong side on that. Alright, so it's just chipping the resin. So I'm going to go to the X-Acto, and boom, that piece of resin came right off with the X-Acto. Not a problem, and you can see it cleaned up that groove right there. That was all filled in really quickly. Let me see if there's a big piece of flash here. Even the X-Acto is having a hard time with this resin. It's really, really hard resin. It's not soft, but it's definitely, the X-Acto is definitely cutting through resin a lot easier than the Flashmaster. So right now, for resin, the X-Acto blade is winning. And I'm thinking it's just because this is a stiffer blade on a harder material. So the X-Acto blade is going to have a lot easier of a time getting to the resin. And you can see there's a piece of resin in between, if you can see. I don't know if you can, but there's a piece of resin in between these two gaps that's not supposed to be there. So let's go back to the Flashmaster. Okay, that time the Flashmaster took that off nice and easy. So that was a thinner piece of resin flash, so it has no problem going through the thinner flash. But the thicker flash, it was having a little bit of problem on resin. Getting that off. See this? See, that just kind of broke it instead of slicing through it. So thin resin, you'll have no problem going through. And like I said, the resin's a thicker material than styrene, so I don't know if this blade is meant for resin. I'm just putting it to the test on resin. It looks like flash on the side here. Actually, no, I think that's actually part of the wing kit right there, the wingtip, because that's pretty solid. I won't know until I put it on, but there is flash in between here. Now, one of the things I'm going to tell you to remember, Remember that the blade isn't on the angled part here, it's on the flat part there. So let's flip that around to the flat part and just slices right through. Very thin flash. Well, let's get that over there. And we're just messing around with the flash to see how well it does. And boom, that takes it right off. And it bends with the piece. I'm just trying to get that really, I'm digging into the plastic now. I'm digging into the plastic. Okay. So after I dug in just a wee bit too much to the plastic there, I don't know if you can see it there, you can see it. I actually bent the blade. I bent the blade when I was trying to get this over here. Just trying to get that flash off. It actually bent the blade. Even though it's flexible, I didn't think I was gonna bend it like that. So I warped that blade. Okay, next up, I'm going to use a Tamiya figure. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a seam line right down his leg. You can probably see it right there. I'm trying to get the camera to autofocus. And then we're going to go back to the Flash Master here. And we're just going to gently scrape that. Now this is where the Flash Master is mastering. Get that seam line right off. If you go slow and you work with this blade, and I like it because it's going over the contours of the pants, and I'm not taking away the detail of the creases, and I wish the camera was better so you can see that the seam line is going away. It's just taking that top layer of the seam off from the casting process. And I got a nice smooth pair of pants right there. So that worked nice. I don't know if you can see that seam line, but it is there. And it's just scraping. And if you notice, while I'm doing it, you can see the blade actually bending and going with the contour of the pants. You don't want to dig in, because then you're gonna stop the knife from doing what it's doing. It's supposed to be doing. But if you can see, the knife is bending right along with that pant leg, and it's bringing it down nice and smooth. Now this is what the blade is intended for. I think it's really intended for these softer plastic figures, and this is working very nicely, going up and down over the contours of the pants and just taking that flash off. And the thing you got to remember and get used to is which way the blade is. It's not on that angle like I said before, it's on the flat part. I want to be careful on the boot. That works very nicely. Now, I don't really want to ruin this guy. I'm going to see if I can find another figure that I really don't need, because I've heard that you can take off unwanted detail very easily. There's another little bit of seam right there, and if you've seen the knife bend with that, it bent right up this curve, unlike an X-Acto knife that would just stay straight and dig more in. Even just running the blade gently, it doesn't, there's still some there from the X-Acto knife, but with nope, wrong side. With the Flash Master, it just goes right up that curve and bends. So that's nice. Okay, looking through my stash, I found this set, which I didn't even know I had, and I barely touched that. The flash is very bendy. I don't want to take it off the sprue, but that took that right off. I mean, these usually you can flick off, but it leaves the little bit of residue at the end. So we'll go down this curve right here, and that just pops that off. Okay, I'm hoping you can see this piece right here. I'm going to try to take that off because it's supposed to take off extra detail pretty nicely. And look at that. That actually is cutting and it's conforming right to the piece. And it took it off beautifully. These are very, very sharp. Okay, one last piece and then we'll get to the torture testing. This has more of a curve and I'm hoping you can see that mold line right there. This plastic is a little harder, and there is a learning curve to get used to the blade itself, because it's so used to, see, I'm digging in because I'm so used to the stiffness of an X-Acto blade. I'm not used to how this one bends, but as soon as you get used to it, it takes this off right away. But for the seam lines on the figures and the pants and stuff, it does a nice job. And again, I'm having a little trouble with this guy digging in. I keep digging into the surface with it. And with the regular X-Acto, I'm digging in even more. It's definitely a learning curve on this guy. And if you notice this with the X-Acto knife, it didn't come down into this curve here. I just went straight across and I missed this whole piece in here. So we're going to do a few things. One is if we're working on it and we're going to drop it and we're going to see what happens to the point. That was not a far fall. The point didn't break, but the blade totally bent over, so this blade would be shot if you drop it. We'll drop the X-Acto from the same height. That stuck right in the table, and I still have my point. So the dropping, even from a minimal height, that wasn't even a foot, that was about 6 to 8 inches, bends your blade over. I'm going to see if we can get this guy back into shape. And you can bend them. You can definitely bend them back into shape, but then there's a little wave over it. So it's very, I don't want to say flimsy, but it's made thin so you can go around contoured parts and get your seam line off. Now you get to see my sneakers, and we'll do the oopsie off the table, and that actually hit on the shaft ends. So we'll see what happens if we could get it on the blade, which is a good thing. The shaft protects it, but say we're holding it like this and we drop it straight down. Most of us don't have a concrete floor like me, but you'll have a hard wooden floor. I don't know what'll happen on a carpet because I don't have carpeting. So we're going to drop it and see. That is dead straight on the point. And this is what happened to it. Dropping it dead straight on the point. If it slips out of your hand, now that's extreme. It's like I said, this is an extreme test. It's not going to happen all the time, but that shattered the blade, and the blade fell right off. So we're going to do the same thing with the X-Acto and see what happens with that. So I'm not going to roll it off the table. Well, I'll roll it off the table because we'll see what happens. Most of the time when it does roll off the table and falls, the end weight of your handle is going to draw it down. So we got a brand new tip. We're going to drop this straight down like we did with the Flashmaster blade and see if this snaps in half or we just lose a tip or what happens. So it's the same height right underneath the camera. We're going to go straight down to the concrete. Like I said, this is my workshop, so I have a concrete floor. Most people have a hardwood floor. Hardwood, this may stick in. Rugs may be a totally different story, but we're going to go with what I have, and we're going to drop it. And the X-Acto knife, if you can see, is bouncing. The tip actually stuck right into the concrete. We'll pull it out, and it bent very slightly, but I still have a full tip on there. So, what's my final verdict between the Flashmaster flexible blades and the X-Acto blades? I would have to say they both serve a purpose. The flexible blade is definitely, in my opinion, not made for a harder resin. It's just not going to do the job on a harder resin, and I don't think that's what those were made for. They were definitely made for softer plastics. The bendable blade is very, very nice on contoured surfaces, especially if you're working on smaller, softer figures, 1/35th scale, 1/32nd scale, minis and stuff like that. I'm sure they're fine on even 1/8 scale figures also, or bigger figures that are made out of styrene, and it's softer and you can get through those. Definitely good for model cars with the flash around the curved surfaces in your wheel wells and stuff like that. So I would stick to these little guys. I would also use these for certain things on styrene, but for contoured surfaces I would use these. As far as the torture tests we did, if you do drop your blade while you're working, I only dropped it literally from 6 inches down, which would be my working height from here. If it drops straight onto the blade itself, it is going to bend your blade. You can get it back into shape, but it's not going to be perfect shape unless you put it on like an anvil and tap it out and stuff like that. You saw the drop down to the main floor. If you're sitting here over your workbench and you're not over the workbench and your blade does fall to the floor, the X-Acto won that with its thickness. It's literally stuck in my concrete floor, and the blade wobbled while the other one broke in half. The only con that I guess the only con that I would say with these blades is, and it's not really a con, you just got to get used to it. It's a little bit of a pain in the butt to get the blade into the holder. I would prefer to see a longer shank on there where we can drop them in like we do with X-Acto blades and tighten them up, and that would be perfectly fine. They definitely have a use in the arsenal of tools that you have. Just like the company says, this is not meant to replace the X-Acto blade, it's meant to be a part of your tools. So if you do a lot of minis, if you do a lot of 1/35th and 1/32nd scale plastic figures, styrene figures that are a softer plastic, you saw me, I know the camera's I'm actually going to buy another camera soon. The camera didn't show it off too well, but the seam line, it goes right over those contours, takes the flash right off. The one other thing I would say is be very careful. The blades are extremely sharp, and if you've seen me dig into the plastic by accident because I was putting too much pressure, don't pull up like you can with an X-Acto blade, because the X-Acto is thicker. Work yourself backwards, this way you don't bend that blade. So out of a total 5-star rating, I would give it a 4 out of 5 stars, especially if you're working with the softer type plastics. I would definitely pick them up. You've seen them working, so you just gotta, one, be careful of how you're doing your seam work. You don't have to go fast, you don't have to put a lot of pressure. Do it slowly, take that mold line down, and you'll be able to get it off. The X-Acto blade is the same thing, but like I showed you on the roll, the blanket roll or whatever it was, that while I was doing it, the contour, it didn't make it. It just went straight over and left that whole gap. And then because the blade cannot bend, you're either going to have to take sandpaper to get in there, or you're going to have to slice really, really slowly. So we'd like to thank Flashmaster Hobby for sending these over to check them out. You can definitely get them on their website. You can get them on Amazon. They run $9.99 in the US. We'll put the links in the description below. I'm definitely going to get some more of these. It is a learning curve how to use them, because you got to get used to that flex. But as soon as you get used to that flex, I know I'm repeating myself again, but if you are a figure modeler or somebody working with styrene model kits, these will definitely come in handy. And you know, you can have 2, like I have 2. Actually, I have more than 2. I probably have about 10 of these handles sitting around, and I'll have a couple blades in these of the flexible type of blade, and then I will have also the rigid type of blade because they both have their uses. So thank you guys for stopping by, watching the video. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like and subscribe if you haven't subscribed. We'd love to have you part of the community. And again, take a run over to Amazon or Flashmaster Hobby if you're interested in these blades. I definitely give them a thumbs up for taking off flash and doing that on your minis with a lot of curves and stuff like that. And don't forget your car modelers too. The wheel wells, it'll definitely work in there. Thanks again, everybody, for stopping by. We hope to see you all soon, and hopefully this place is done and we'll be back up to running at a usual pace sooner or later. Take care, everybody, and bye-bye.